And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome to Open Connection. I'm your host, Robert Pictou. Our show today comes to you from the unceded and traditional territory of the Tsimshian people. The town was established in 1952, the same year the mining operation began. By the 1970s, Cassiar had a population of 1,500 people, had 2 schools, 2 churches, a small hospital, theater, swimming pool, and recreational center and hockey rink. On today's Open Connection, we open our archives to bring you this story from 1992.
The end of another day's work at the Cassiar asbestos mine. Every shift these miners work brings them closer to their last shift. The Cassiar mine is shutting down in 6 months.
What's morale like around here?
Not too good right now. Pretty low, actually.
Yeah. How are you going to deal with that over the next 6 months?
I don't know. It's going to be hard. It's pretty hard to, give somebody incentive, and there's no incentive to give them. I don't know. We just hope that things work out, that's all.
This isn't just a story about a mine closing down. This is the story about a community that could become just another name in a guidebook on ghost towns of British Columbia. Cassiar is a company town. No mine, no town. 360 of the 1,000 people who live here work directly for the mine. Their families depend on it. And they want to stay here. And it's certainly not for the love of the asbestos they dig from the ground.
Sugar, please. Sugar. Watch the lid.
Family life at the McGill home. This may not be a typical Cassiar family. The McGills have 15 kids, 11 of them still living at home. But they are like the others in Cassiar when they talk about why they want to stay.
How can you explain this place to somebody from outside?
It would be very hard. It's a very friendly community, a safe place to raise your kids. Everybody knows everybody else's kids. Everybody watches out for everybody else. And it's just one of the few places left that are really caring. I hate to leave.
The McGills came to Cassiar 5 years ago. Jim is an accountant at the mine. 2 of their children work there as well.
People don't feel like work. Nobody knows what's going on. Every time we get off work, we hear new rumors about what's happening. One minute we're here and we work till June. The next minute we hear that there's the 3-week layoff in February and hardly any of us are going to be working. Nobody's telling us nothing.
People may have come to Cassiar for the jobs, but they end up staying for the lifestyle. Cassiar is a family town. It's got a very low turnover rate for a mining community, around 15%. They've got many of the services you'd only expect in a much larger community, including a brand new high school. It just opened this month. It cost $6 million to build. The grads of 92 may be its first and only grads. Uncertainty is now the way of life in Cassiar. They don't take personal checks at the grocery store anymore. Supplies are beginning to dwindle.
We can't gear for any of the seasonal stuff for the simple reason is we don't know what happens in 6 months. We're still in limbo. We have no choice whatsoever but to gear down.
Why the town is facing such hardship brings us, of course, back here to the mine. And it's the story of how the mine got into such serious financial difficulty. They've been mining asbestos here for almost 40 years, and there's still plenty left, 10 to 20 years worth. They sell every bit of it. It's used to make cement and pipes. The problem here isn't supply and demand, it's how they get it out of the earth. For most of the 40 years, Cassiar was an open pit mine, but the asbestos is too deep in the earth now, and last year they began tunnel mining. It's the cost of moving underground that's killing them, far more than engineers predicted. The mountain is shifting, the tunnels are squeezing closed, and now the creditors are squeezing the company. Cassiar Mining is now $57 million in debt. $25 million of its debt to the province alone. The mine asked the government for another $13 million loan, but Victoria says it's too risky. The mine manager, Hedley Duffield, says the engineering problems are behind them.
We've learnt how to arrest the movement before it starts. And our ground support techniques have improved over the past 12 months as we've gone through this learning experience.
We want some answers from you. We want some answers. Well, it's dragging on for too long.
The largest town meeting in Cassiar's history. Of course, the McGills are here, and they, like the entire community, want answers. For the first time, they get to meet face-to-face with a cabinet minister, Dan Miller.
This is a very difficult issue, and I want to say that the government and the company are cooperating to the utmost in trying to deal with this issue.
The McGills and the others were told they won't be abandoned entirely. The forest minister guaranteed the province will keep the mine open until July, pay their severances, mortgages, moving expenses, and job retraining. It'll cost the province at least $13 million, the amount the company wanted to invest in the mine. Most feel at least some sense of relief.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Thank you for staying with us. By the early 1990s, diminished demand for asbestos and the expensive complications faced after converting from an open pit mine to an underground mine made the continued operation of the mine unprofitable. Today, the streets are bare and the flowers bloom where houses once stood. Let us return to the archives as residents of Cassiar contemplate on the future.
It's nice to know that you are going to get some help to get out of here.
I've made preparations to leave this town. I didn't know where I was going, but I had a place to go to stay. But now I feel I have a far better chance.
At least there's some certainty now of what's going to happen in the immediate future. It looks like we're going to have a job for the next 6 months at least. And that gives us time to make some plans.
Gives his people strength if we believe in his way.
And so they face their uncertain future together, not knowing where they'll be living and working beyond summer. They have only a slim hope that some private investor will take a chance and keep the mine going.
While Cassiar's dilemma has remained a provincial problem, the federal government and the federal representative in this area can ill afford to pay a deaf ear to what could be devastating effects for the community and others in the Northwest. Skeena MP Jim Fulton has spent a great deal of time talking to officials with Princeton Mining and to the people of Cassiar, and admits while the situation is disastrous, it's something the mining resource sector continues to live with.
It's very sad to see any community, not just anywhere in BC, anywhere in the country, becoming a ghost town, which effectively is what appears to be the future for Cassiar. It eventually happens to almost any mineral-based community. I've had meetings with the president of the company, with the steelworkers, with people from the Ministry of Finance, the minister's office, and regrettably, the situation in terms of the development of the different levels within the McDame deposit. People have to remember they've gone from an above-ground open pit to an underground operation, have had enormous cost overruns. They're into the province for about $25 million. The company was not able, at least so far, to put forward a restructuring plan with a significant amount of capital to allow independent assessors to suggest that they're going to be in a profitable situation in the near future. It would be quite a long period of time before they were back in black ink. And regrettably, there is quite a widespread impact. It's going to affect the communities, not just Cassiar itself, but it will affect Good Hope Lake, it will affect Watson Lake, it will affect Dease Lake.
Much of the Northwest.
Terrace, obviously Stewart. There's about 40 jobs with the Arrow truckers. So it's it's unfortunate, and that has been a very long-standing mine here in the Northwest. It's been running for 4 decades, and I know an awful lot of people there very well who will be very sad to see the community mothballed.
It's got to be a tough situation for someone like yourself, because the obvious question to me is what happens now? But I mean, it's impossible for the Member of Parliament to have many answers. You have just said it's a tough situation, but the mining industry is not going great guns in British Columbia recently in the last year or so. I wonder what will happen to these people.
Well, I mean, we're talking about some very highly skilled underground miners. Some of them will be reabsorbed within the hard rock sector. Certainly some of the drillers will also. But it's a tough time in the economy. We're looking at higher than usual unemployment here in BC and across the country. We're looking at a fairly slow mining sector right across Canada. And there aren't an awful lot of asbestos operations in Canada. The only other serious competition in Canada for Cassiar has been Baie Verte in eastern Canada. So it's a sad situation, but I think everyone has recognized, Mr. Little from the steelworkers and everyone else have made it quite clear if the company, if the private sector, Princeton and their shareholders aren't going to put money, serious money on the table to go ahead and redevelop another level, why should the taxpayers of British Columbia? And it's a tough financial decision, and it will be quite some time before someone else redevelops that deposit. There's a lot of asbestos there, and there's a lot of jade, and I'm convinced that someday it will be developed again.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome back to Open Connection. First published in 1792 during George Washington's first term as president, Robert Thomas's Farmer's Almanac was an instant success, with circulation tripled from 3,000 to 9,000 during the second year. Let us return to the archives as John Crawford reflects on the accuracy of the publication.
Weather forecasting's come a long way since the days when we relied on this. Oh, people still swear by the Farmer's Almanac, but it misses the mark every once in a while. For example, this winter is supposed to be unusually cold and unusually dry. Well, it hasn't turned out that way, but then again, who could have predicted the kind of winter we've had this year? And with all their high-tech equipment, how much better off are today's weather forecasters? Sometimes it seems they miss the mark a lot too. We decided to take a closer look early last month, and we chose a good day, January the 8th. A weather system was bearing down on us, bringing along a risk of freezing rain. It was now up to weatherman Adrian van de Mosler to determine what areas were likely to be hit, and then begin notifying the proper people.
Hello there, this is Adrian van de Mosler from the Terrace Weather Office. We're issuing a freezing rain warning for the area. We can expect freezing rain to occur probably any time through the day today and through the evening. So I figured I'd let you know. Okay, I can do that as well. Okay, because it's in effect for the Bulkley Valley as well. There's several people, like I've already contacted the helicopters and that kind of thing. People have airplanes and helicopters parked out here. They don't like having freezing rain on their stuff. BC Hydro has already been contacted because they always get like to know about it. I don't know what they can do about it though. I don't think that they can do much about it.
The trickiest part of the job is pinpointing exactly where things are going to happen. In an area like ours, where temperatures and conditions change rapidly over a relatively short distance, that's certainly not easy.
I had to contact the agencies in Prince Rupert, warning them about the freezing rain. Now, they are sitting in Prince Rupert where it's right now 8 degrees, but right in Terrace here, we're sitting at -4. So somewhere in between, and could even be as close as Rainbow Summit outside of Prince Rupert, it's below freezing, and then they are getting freezing rain through that area. So it's just a matter of driving a little bit further inland, and you get into the outflow, and you get into the below freezing temperatures and back into the freezing rain.
Adrian, one of the things about doing a weather forecast in this area is that you've got a lot of different areas to cover in not really all that many miles. You've got everything from the Queen Charlotte's and Prince Rupert, where you get a lot of wet stuff, rain we're talking. You've got the Bulkley Valley and the Lakes District, which is well into the interior, more extremes, and then Terrace and Kitimat kind of in the middle. That must make it tough on a weatherman to try to forecast precisely for those many different areas.
It certainly makes it a lot more difficult than working at a weather office in Manitoba or in Saskatchewan, where the weather just sort of passes through the area and it remains the same as it moves. It certainly is much more challenging than that. Many places in BC are like that because of the mountainous terrain. It's difficult and it changes dramatically from place to place. But yeah, we just have to account for the fact that the temperatures are going to be this much warmer on the coastline, and you have to know what's happening in Terrace. The inflow and outflow winds in Terrace pretty well control our weather. If you can figure out when it's going to be inflow, when it's going to be outflow, you can pretty well have a feel on what the weather's like. If it's inflow, we're getting Rupert weather. If it's outflow, we're getting Smithers weather. And then Smithers in the Bulkley Valley area, we're looking at another set of parameters, and up north it's colder again. So yeah, it's difficult, and we produce a highways forecast, which actually gives spots right across the entire area of responsibility that we have, right across the entire northwest of BC. And these spots, each location is significantly different from one another. And it really takes it takes the theoretical knowledge of what happens with meteorology, but it also takes a lot of experience in the area and getting to know that that certain areas get a lot of snow, even though you're not expecting to have that much in many other of the areas. So it takes a lot of experience in knowing the specific locations. You go around the corner in a mountain valley and it changes the weather, so you have to know where exactly where you're talking about when you're trying to figure out what the weather's like.
Now, as you mentioned, a lot of BC is like that, of course, just about the entire province. So if you were in the Kootenays, you'd have similar problems, with one exception, of course, and that's that you don't have the ocean right there.
That's right, yeah. And you're dealing with different air masses here. You're dealing with much greater changes in temperature. You drive from here to Rupert in the wintertime, it's warmer in Rupert. If you drive from here to Rupert in the summertime, it's colder in Rupert. Yeah, you don't have the big temperature swings. So it's just something that we have to deal with. It's part of the job.
The dynamic nature of any weather pattern will always add a certain amount of uncertainty to any weather forecast, and that's why they use terms such as probability of precipitation and the like.
The systems that are moving in are always evolving as they move. So they're not, they don't cross the Charlottes and then look exactly the same when they hit Prince Rupert and then look exactly the same when they come into Terrace. Quite often the systems will either be developing and getting more intense as they move into the area, or they could be weakening. And if I'm looking at a large system that's probably going to dump a fair amount of precipitation on the Queen Charlotte Islands, they could be deteriorating to the point where it may not even exist by the time it gets to Terrace. And you have to try and figure out how much of this system is going to be left by the time it gets to Terrace. And again, yeah, you're watching the systems evolve and trying to figure out exactly what is going to happen. You know, that's why we often explain what's happening. When people ask me for a forecast, I also try to explain exactly what's happening. I'll say, people ask me, if you're wondering if you want to go for a picnic today in Terrace, and you want to know if the weather's good. I'll say we have a frontal system approaching the Queen Charlotte Islands. It's fairly good, well developed right now. It's going to be raining on the Queen Charlotte Islands. It's moving our direction, however, it's deteriorating rapidly, and I'm not too sure if there's going to be anything left here. My forecast is cloudy periods through the day with a chance of a shower. Okay, now when I tell you that, the reason why I'm telling you the first thing is you may understand a little bit more as to what I'm up against. I have a frontal system here that contains a lot of moisture, but it looks as if it's going to die by the time it gets here. If I'm wrong by just a matter of 50 or 60 kilometers, which is in meteorological terms, that's pretty small. If I'm wrong by a little bit, you might get a little bit more rain than what I was expecting. So hopefully, by hearing that, you'll understand a little bit more what's going on and be able to maybe adjust your activity to the forecast.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
The world's first televised weather forecast, including the use of weather maps, were broadcast by the BBC in November of 1936. George Cowan gave the first weather forecast while being televised in front of a map in 1954. In this final segment of Open Connection, we return to the archives to discover how a weather forecast can change our outdoor plans.
The forecast I give you may take a lot more attention if you're pouring a $10,000 slab of concrete that can't have any rain, or if you're tearing the roof off your house. Then I might give that more attention or spend a little more time on studying the chances of a rain shower than I would give if you asked me if you're going to want to wax your car. I might ask you more specifically, where exactly are you going to be pouring the slab, or where exactly are you tearing the roof off your house? If you are going to wax your car and you hear on the radio that you're expecting sunny with the occasional cloudy period and there's a slight chance of showers, that may be fine for you to wax your car somewhere in town, and you may not worry about calling me for a specific forecast. But if I'm going to tear the roof off my house and I hear that, I would like to call the weather office and find out those chances of scattered showers. Is that going to happen? Is it going to rain into my house if I had the roof off?
And then again, if you're a mineral geologist and you want to get to a remote mine site, you're going to want a different type of information from the weatherman.
That's right, yeah. Different different activities require different types of forecasts. And the forecasts that a person hears on the radio and TV are good for general what's happening in the weather today. But if a specific activity really requires a more specific type of forecast, and we can provide those types of forecasts and give you a little more idea on the certainty of the forecast that we're providing.
Another service they provide in the summer months is monitoring the dryness of the forests.
We man a forest fire weather desk in Smithers through the summertime, so we are very familiar with the areas, particularly in the Bulkley Valley and the dry areas. We're always concerned about that. It's a big difference. You have a frontal system moving against the north coast. It dumps all of the moisture on Prince Rupert. It gets over the coast mountains and it's dry on the other side. It doesn't do anything. It just ends up a big rain shadow or almost a desert effect in many of these lee sides of the mountain ranges. So again, it's something that we have to get used to. If we see a system approaching at a certain angle, hitting the coastal mountains, we have an idea of how much moisture is contained in this system. We say in that respect, we are going to allow, say, 30 millimeters of precipitation to drop in Prince Rupert, and because of the motion and because of the direction that it's coming across the coast mountains, we may feel that we're going to get a big break over Burns Lake area and there won't be any precipitation. So it's a matter of watching how these systems go, and when you don't get it right, if you're incorrect on one situation, you go back and look at it and see what it looked like and what your forecast was and see exactly what happened. And then next time you see that same situation, you try and forecast and correct your forecast for it, and hopefully it works out again. And it's a lot of noticing what it looks like, what a situation looks like, and allowing for X number of millimeters of precipitation in Rupert and so much happening in Burns Lake.
The Weather Office also houses Transport Canada's Flight Services Station, where information is constantly relayed to pilots approaching the airport or those planning to depart. So what kind of a year was 1991 weather-wise? Well, according to the statistics, it certainly wasn't a normal year.
Last year we had, for 1991, we had 1,823 millimeters of precipitation. Now, normally for a year we would end up with 1,313. So it was well above normal for the amounts of precipitation. November and December, we broke record precipitation amounts for those months, total precipitation. So November and December were very wet. Also, we will recall that in November we broke the record low number of hours of sunshine, when we only had 9.8 hours of sunshine in November. So the last half of the year in particular was very warm, very wet and dreary. But January, you have to remember last January, I came back from holidays and it was really cold. Last January, we were well below normal for temperatures, and we also had way more than average sunshine in January. We had way below normal for precipitation in January as well. So the year actually started out very bright, very cold, and very dry, but we will recall the last several months where it's just been very warm, very, very wet.
Very wet indeed. And we've had so much cloud cover this year, and of course the tail end of last year, that you'd have to think that 1991 was probably one of the darker years on record, right? Well, a look at the statistics provided us with a surprise.
Here's an astounding fact.
What's that?
We had more than average sunshine.
More than average sunshine for the year?
Yeah.
Wow.
What a fact. Look at it. What a
must have been all concentrated then in those first 6 months.
It really was.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Open Connection. The greatest distance in the existence of man is not from here to there, but the connection from his mind and heart. If we can conquer that distance, we can soar like an eagle and realize our immensity within. I'm Robert Pictou.